On today's show, we've got a full recap of day one of NHL free agency. Tons of money thrown around. What was the best value deals? And there were also some questionable contracts.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday, July 2nd edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan over at Locked On Ottawa Senators 5 days a week, and it is the Battle of Ontario coming off of Canada Day from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. It is Mike DiStefano, and Mikey, we got to start with what we saw yesterday, and it wasn't a move, but it was the introduction of Mitch Marner in Vegas. Did that bring up some feelings? How was it like watching the drum entrance and the office was all fired up, and then Marner pulling on his old London Knights, number 93?
93, yeah. You know what? It didn't bother me. I think it seemed very Marner-esque. He wanted the glitz and glam. He wanted the red carpet treatment, and he got it over in Vegas. So he got it, and I wish him all the best. I have no doubt. Like, I've always said this. Like, Mitch Marner probably is going to go to another organization and then have success. Finally figure it out in the playoffs. It's going to happen. But it was never going to happen in Toronto. He put too much pressure on himself in this market specifically, and it was just not going to happen. It would have already happened if it was going to. So they may go on, he may go on and have greener pastures, and things might, go swimmingly in Vegas. But I mean, I have no ill will on the guy. I'm not gonna wish. I saw some Leaf fans wishing that he gets career-ending injuries and whatever. Like, there's some terrible nonsense going on out there. But look, his time was up in Toronto, right? Time was up in Toronto. He didn't want to return. At least the Leafs got something for him in Nicolas Waugh. He's not a household name by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a good veteran, good depth piece for the Maple Leafs, who will play a good depth role for the team. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's interesting. I think a lot of people were just kind of done and over with the Mitch Marner era here in Toronto. So seeing him go off and get the red carpet rolled out for him in Vegas, like, all right, go ahead. That's what you wanted. Go get that.
All right. Well, if you need any tips on how to deal with any success of a former star on your team going to have success in Vegas, I'm your guy, as Mark Stone was the first player to get that type of entrance. I think he came off the airport and the cheerleaders were all there getting ready to welcome him. And that's the last thing you want to see getting off a 5-hour flight. You're just like, come on, man, let me get my luggage and get some sleep. But the Vegas Golden Knights, obviously, they'll spend money. And yesterday, there's a lot less money spent than the year before. There weren't as many big names because the Florida Panthers scooped all their own names right off the mat before. We spoke about that yesterday on Locked On NHL, so we won't get back into that. But it did mean that some extra money was thrown out, right? You take fish out of the pond, it's harder to catch the ones that are still there. What was the contract to you where you're like, oh yeah, that's a July 1st deal, and that's not the kind of contract that player would get under different circumstances?
There was a few. The Tanner Jeannot deal, I still don't quite understand how that guy is getting $3.2 million. Like, Tanner Jeannot, like, how many points did he have last year? It could not have been very much. 15 points, and like, sure, I get it. He takes a good punch in the face and he could deliver one right back. But we're talking about, this is now 3 straight years. He had 18 points, 14 points, 13 points in the last 3 years. That guy's making over $3 million AAV on a 4-year deal. What the hell is Boston thinking? Like, of course it was Boston that gave him that money, but like, in what way is he worth even half that? I could not fathom that contract. That one, to me, 4 years, 3.2 AAV for Tanner Jeannot in Boston. That one threw me for a loop.
Well, the Boston Bruins, one of the most active teams in the National Hockey League on free agency, not only with Tanner Jeannot, but they signed Matej Blumel to a one-way contract. They signed Mikey Eyssimont. They signed Jordan Harris, Alex Steves. They brought back Sean Corral, who had success there earlier in his career, Riley Tufte, Jonathan Aspero, and Luke Cavalin. So they're one of the busiest teams. Obviously, a lot of those are depth signings. Only Sean Corrali, Blumel, and Jeannot are on, and Mikey Eyssimont are on one-way contracts. But with that to say, they felt, my guess at least, is that Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, the guys making the decisions there, they probably felt like they were going too far the other way from their identity as the big, bad Boston Bruins. They also brought in Victor Arvidsson in a trade, right? They've got Casey Middlestat, Victor Arvidsson as two of their top 6 players, you'd imagine. And like, that's not the Boston Bruins way. Those are undersized skill players. They brought in a skill player in James Hagen's, great pick, by the way, at 7th overall, but still not like that Boston Bruin type when you think of the big bad Bruins. So my guess is this was, oh my goodness, we got to get some toughness into the lineup. So let's go out and pay the cost of acquisition. That's a contract I'm glad the Senators stayed away from. Ottawa was rumored to be for him as well. So that was, to me as well, the contract that kind of stood out yesterday in terms of, whoa, that's what he got. But another one, and I want to get to this, we'll get more into the questionable contracts later, maybe some losers of the day. I feel like nobody really wins free agency day, July 1st, but there are some teams where you're like, oh, what are you doing? But a player that both of our teams are familiar with. Does Cody Ceci have the best agent in NHL history?
Dude, another one. I couldn't believe it. What boggled my mind, like Ceci gets 4 years, 4.5 per year. Yeah. 4.5
I had to do the same
year.
when Erica Branson signed. It was like a 4-year, $4 million contract. I was like, oh, $1 million a year. No. Each.
Per year. Yeah, per year. But I was floored because it got announced along with the Dumoulin deal. And I'm like, I would pay Dumoulin so much more money than Cody Ceci. How did he possibly get more? It really is befuddling to me. And that guy continues to make money. Like, I don't get it. I really don't get the love for Cody Ceci out there. Sure, right-handed. He's a big boy. I guess he's played in some big moments, like over the last couple of years in Edmonton and last year in Dallas. But man,
well, he was on the Sens team that made it to Game 7 of the conference finals. He's sneaky. Had 106 career playoff games. He's played double-digit playoff games in 5 different years.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but I don't know. I've seen him play hockey enough to know that he ain't worth $4.5 million a year. I can tell you that.
Fun Cody Ceci fact. Guess how many games he played last year?
I don't know, 56.
85 with the trade.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's the most anyone played in the National Hockey League last season with the trade that he had from San Jose to Dallas. But yeah, the LA Kings we'll get to a little bit later. Feels like to me, Ken Holland got a little too excited with the veterans and even with the players they moved out. And was it also a bit expensive to get rid of another one? Like, was that contract worth not signing? We'll get to that later in the questionable contracts. But overall, your impression of free agency, how do you feel this year stacked up versus some of the others?
Well, quite a dud, I guess you could say. Like a lot of guys just were retained by their teams, and there's even some of the big fish that got to free agency but circled back and went, like Brock Besser got to free agency and then circled back and went signed with Vancouver anyway. Like, just didn't seem like there was a whole lot of superstar power out there. You know, once the Marner trade came through, Florida signed their own guys, and you know, you had a bunch of players. Patrick Kane went back to Detroit. You know, a bunch of these guys that were like marquee players that ended up just re-signing, and made for a little bit of a dud free agency where, you know, for the first while, the biggest contract signed was like Christian Dvorak had signed a 1-year deal at $5.4 million, which also is just a wild number as well. But that was kind of my takeaway. It was just kind of a dud year, not a whole lot of star status out there, and not a lot of contracts that were signed. And the big fish, technically, the number one guy on the board, still out there, Nick Ehlers.
Yes, and he is going to get the absolute bag because there's no other career consistent forwards that are out there that can immediately add a scoring punch to your top six. The biggest move of the day was a trade between Carolina and the New York Rangers. We'll get to that next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I just subscribed to Monarch Money a couple months ago, and I already feel better about the state of my future. Take control of your finances just like I did with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL, and you get half off your first year. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen. We have local experts on the biggest stories, and dare I say, this is the best time to check out other Locked On NHL shows. When a player either gets acquired by your favorite team or gets moved off of it, you know that there'll be another Locked On NHL host that can give you the rundown. For example, when Jordan Spence got traded to the Ottawa Senators, I reached out to our good friend Eddie Garcia over at Locked On LA Kings. I said, hey, can you jump on? Boom, comes on the show and gives us the scoop of what we can expect of that player. So that's a common theme throughout the Locked On network, and that's why we have so much fun with our local experts covering the biggest story. So let's get to the biggest story yesterday, and it was the K'Andre Miller trade to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for a conditional first-round pick, a second-round pick, and maybe the crown jewel of the return for the New York Rangers. It's defenseman Scott Morrow, who's 6'2", right shot, dazzled in college with the University of Massachusetts, and then K'Andre Miller was able to get a deal done. K'Andre Miller, because it's a sign and trade, was able to get an 8-year deal with the Carolina Hurricanes at $7.5 million. What did you think when that deal came through?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that they got actually a lot for K'Andre Miller, and K'Andre Miller got paid a lot of money. He was someone who had like an inconsistent season. A couple of years ago, I thought K'Andre Miller was going to be a stud. And then, inconsistency started to kind of creep up into his game, but I think he's a good player. But I thought Scott Morrow was a good player too. I was quite shocked to see that was the return that Carolina had to give up to get K'Andre Miller. A 1, a 2, and then a top prospect on top of that. Like, it just seemed like a lot to pay for a guy who hasn't quite blossomed into like that consistent top pair defenseman. But that's the type of return that you gave up. So, and that's the type of money they gave him in term they gave him as well on that contract. So we'll see what ends up happening. It did raise an eyebrow though. Seemed like quite a lot to give up in terms of assets and money for K'Andre Miller.
And you just figure that the way the Carolina Hurricanes play is going to fit in seamlessly. But the Hurricanes, all of a sudden, they're pretty loaded on the left side of their blue line. So I'm curious to see how everything shakes out. Obviously, K'Andre Miller is going to be a mainstay in the top 4, especially at that salary. But it feels like it's almost blocking, in a sense, Alexander Nikishin, who came over from Russia. Finally, was often touted as the best player outside the NHL. So now he's looking up, and Jacob Slavin is one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. And then Alexander Nikishin now in the third pair. Now that's great for the depth, but we'll see how long that's a feasible solution before things may have to shift even further on the blue line. The Carolina Hurricanes, by the way, their blue line is still in flux from the sense that Brent Burns is out there as a free agent. I would imagine this even further negates the possibility he comes back.
Really quickly, what type of number you think it takes to get Brent Burns?
I'm curious because this was obviously his least productive season in the NHL, and he's going to be 40 years old he is 40 years old. He's going to be 41 in March. but he still does his thing out there. Like, he still averaged 21 minutes a game for a really good team and had 29 points last season. Like, yeah, it's gone from 61 to 43 to 29 in his 3 years with Carolina, but he's still an NHL defenseman. So I'm curious to see, is it something where maybe the ego or the pride gets in the way where he's like, hey, I'm still a top 4 defenseman. Look at my average time on ice, and I still was all right on a good team last year. So is he going to look for maybe a rebuilding team type situation where he can still be a top 4 defenseman? Or is he going to say, okay, I still haven't won a Stanley Cup. I've played over almost 1,500 games in the regular season. He's 3 away from that milestone. And I just want to go to the best situation, maybe be the 6th defenseman, maybe be a 7th defenseman, although he's working on the NHL's Iron Man streak right now. He hasn't missed a game since 2013-14. So I think this is going to be an interesting one, but maybe he's waiting for the dust to settle here and then say, hey, where can I be the best asset and have a chance to win?
Yeah, I just the number I saw The Athletic put, like, when they had their projections, it was like 1 year, 5.4 million.
Ooh.
I'm not sure he gets that much money. I don't know. Like, he like you said, his numbers are coming down. Like, last year he had 6 goals, 23 assists for 29 points. Like, he still would have to, most of his value would probably be quarterback in a power play, but he got to pay a QB, specialist over 5 million. I mean, I guess if you're a team that needs to get to the cap floor, which there are some teams out there, which is funny because not a lot of players worth paying to get there, but you would think that Brent Burns at this point in his career, like, probably cup chasing. No, like, Brent Burns did he have a cup? No, he doesn't have a cup.
No.
So you would think that he'd want to go to a team, take a like, would you be surprised if he ended up, taking a 1 year, $1 million deal in, like, Florida or Tampa,
Yeah,
or Dallas, or
Vegas? I think
Florida
might be out of the question now just because they basically gave that same concept to Jeff Petrie on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I probably would have took Brent Burns over Jeff Petrie, but I guess maybe they reached out and Burns wants more money. Possibly. Could be.
Did the Oilers make sense?
I don't know. I don't know if the Oilers make sense. I mean, possibly, but like
Ty Emberson on the right side.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. Like, they got Bouchard out there. Like, he's kind of the guy on the power play. So, like, where's Brent Burns really gonna make his money? I feel like you would need a team that needs someone for the power play, unless they're going to utilize PP2 a little more. But why would you? We got that dominant of a power play.
Yeah, Brent Burns will be interesting. He's coming off an 8-year monster contract. I believe 64 million was the total there. I think there was some cap retained, but wasn't there some cap retained by San Jose when they moved him?
Well, possibly, but I don't really matter.
It was an 8-year, $64 million contract for an $8 million. Hey, while we're talking about Carolina, brings us into the best value deal, and it's a re-signing. What is Logan Stankoven doing taking that contract? Like, is he okay? Does he understand that he would have made so much more than that, whether he just held for the rest of this season and then went forward? But 8 years with a cap hit of $6 million at 22 years old, he's already more valuable than that, and he's still only going to get better.
Yeah, that one was a bit of a head scratcher because it's not even like it's one of those markets that you really want to be in, like a New York or a Chicago, or a Toronto, or one of the Canadian markets down south, no income tax mark. Like, it was a real, perplexing deal to see such a young kid take, but good for Carolina. I mean, they clearly found a fit there with a player that they like. He totally is all, like, he is an all Hurricane. Like, you think about the mold of the type of player that the Hurricanes love, like just those, analytically driven, small, skilled guys. Like, that's what Stankoven is. So he totally fits the identity of what the Hurricanes want to be. So it makes sense that they want to lock him up, and well, they put a number in front of him that he just couldn't refuse. It's still a lot of money, let's be honest. Still a decent chunk of change. And, I guess it was enough for him.
Yeah, it was. And the Carolina Hurricanes must be very happy. At least they've got something long term to show for the Mikko Rantanen trade that isn't just a bunch of picks, which
Yeah.
Carolina typically does well with those draft selections. On the other side, something that's a lot more common on trade deadline day, and those are the questionable contracts. Before we get to that, though, I know you mentioned him earlier, though, but that Brock Besser deal, that's great for the Vancouver Canucks. He wanted to be
Yeah.
there, but that number for him, you got to think he was asking for a lot more and just wanted to be there or whatnot, because I'm sure on the open market, he would have gotten more money than that.
He probably would have got a little bit more, like maybe into the eights, possibly. So he probably left a little bit of money on the table. But Patrick Alvim was saying that, Connor Garland and Thatcher Demko, two guys who had just re-signed for long term to stay in Vancouver, were instrumental in saying, hey, let's all stick around and let's see this thing out. Let's see what we can do. Right? It's been a bit of it was a tumultuous season for Vancouver, but let's kind of put that in the past and move forward. And they brought the band back together in a way. They swap out Pia Suter for Vander Kane, and we'll see what happens in Vancouver. But and hopefully you get a healthy Thatcher Demko also. But yeah, that was interesting. I didn't expect that. I will say that I did not expect Besser to circle back and sign back in Van for a pretty good ticket too. Pretty solid number for both parties.
Yeah, I can't say that about everything in the NHL on free agency day. On the other side, some questionable deals were done. We'll get to that next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. Make sure you're following, subscribed on YouTube, and checking out all the Locked On NHL podcasts like Locked On Maple Leafs, Locked On Senators. We got teams and shows for everything you need to know across the National Hockey League. We talk about Tanner Jeannot. We talked about the Christian Dvorak signing, which is enormous in terms of the actual money, but at least that one is a 1-year term, and Philadelphia will have some flexibility beyond this one season. But outside of that, what other deals did you kind of open your eyes at and say, wait, he got how much for how long?
I was a little surprised. I would say it wasn't a free agency signing, I suppose, but I was surprised at the number that Kuzmenko got to come back to LA. Like, I know it worked out decently for Kuzmenko, but 4.3 seemed like a little bit much for someone who, had really struggled for the last 2 seasons. And then, yeah, it went well in LA, I suppose, but I thought that, you could probably get him for a little bit more of a value contract there. So that one surprised me a little bit, I would say. But yeah, we kind of talked about the other ones that really were most surprising to me. It was the Jeannot and the Cody Ceci deals. Those ones were just absolutely insane.
Well, let's touch on Los Angeles then, because I think if you're looking at a team that made the most questionable moves, it's the LA Kings. And it was all in the span of like 5 minutes. First, they signed Corey Perry. And I don't know if you saw at the Royal Half on Twitter, LA Kings blog, they tweeted, I'm figuring out that here, I actually want to read it word for word, because this is one of the all-time unfortunate hockey tweets I've ever seen. The tweet reads, to be honest, I'm relieved that it was Corey Perry, because for a moment there, I thought the LA Kings did something really dumb, like sign Cody Ceci.
Oh man, what a tweet! What a tweet!
Yeah.
By the way, plus 1,000, 10-1 for the Kings to win the West next year.
No, I will not be. I will not be getting on that. So they give
Corey
$2 million.
Perry. Corey Perry.
No,
it's a guarantee. It's a lock.
No. This is the odd year out there. Corey Perry making $2 million in base salary. He can earn bonuses as a plus 35-year-old player on that contract. Then they go out and bring in Joel Armia on a 2-year deal. Yoel Armia, I should say. 2-year deal at a $2.5 million cap hit. That's fine. He's 32. He's a serviceable third-line player. But this is where they lost me. The CC deal we already touched on, 4.5 on a 4-year term. Then they bring in Brian Dumoulin at a $4 million cap hit on a 3-year term. And then they go out and get Anton Forsberg, who either has an A game or a Z game. There's nothing in between for him ever since the unfortunate double MCL tears on the same play, but a 2-year term at $2.5 million. So it's mostly the defenseman they brought in that kind of doesn't really do it for me. A 33-year-old in Dumoulin and 32 in Cody Ceci, but I have no clue how the LA Kings think they're a better team now than they were before. And that doesn't even include the Kuzmenko deal that you had alluded to earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure either, but like it's been a couple of years where we've kind of questioned Kenny Holland, and he kind of went and grabbed a couple of pieces that he liked from his Edmonton team and decided, all right, let's bring him over to LA and see how it works there. So I'm curious to see how that one will kind of shake out too.
Yeah, and if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, you're probably feeling pretty okay with what happened there. I'm looking at the Jacob Pelletier deal, 2-way contract in year 1, and then he's got 2 more years on a 1-way. He was one of those players that fans always felt like never got enough opportunity, but was always a good young player, and it just feels like the type of player that's going to pop down in Tampa. And then they brought in your old third line center from Toronto, Pontus Holmberg, and maybe he's a fourth line center there. So at least they did a couple small moves. If we're looking at another team that's still so far below the cap floor, I was surprised, 2 of them. I was surprised that Chicago and San Jose barely did anything. San Jose more active. They give Adam Gaudette a 2-year deal at $2 million per year. They signed Philip Kurashev just over $1 million and re-signed their RFA William Eklund to a 3-year bridge deal at 5.6. And John Klingberg 1 year at $4 million, but they had so much more that it felt like those 2 teams in particular. And if you're looking at Chicago, they really didn't do anything except for trade for Sam Lafferty out of Boston, I believe, or no, where did they got him? Buffalo. Yeah, he was. And they traded. Apparently it's the 3rd time that Kyle Davidson has traded for Sam Lafferty, which I found a little amusing there. But if you're Connor Bedard, you must be looking at that and saying, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah, you'd think. Although last year they kind of went and they spent a lot of money. They were very, very happy-go-lucky on free agency, and I don't think any of those signings worked out. So maybe that was a cautionary tale, and they said, you know what, we're not going to blow our brains out here. We'll maybe stay a little patient. I think they'll be in on Nick Ehlers. I don't think they'll get Nick Ehlers. But maybe they go the trade route. They got a lot of picks and prospects. So maybe they let the young boys cook down in Chicago after all.
Yeah, and if you're Chicago, their highest paid forwards are Andre Burakovsky, who they traded for last week, got out of Joe Veleno's contract. You could say they got into Burakovsky's contract at 5.5 for the next 2 years. And Tyler Bertuzzi, one of those free agent signings you mentioned last summer, where he's making 5.5. So up front, they are a team that does not have a star to play alongside Connor Bedard. And they also, they're a team that has so much flexibility next season. You know how much cap space the Chicago Blackhawks have? They have to get to the floor this season. They're not too far away from the floor. Do you know how much cap space the Chicago Blackhawks will have next summer? It has to be the most in the NHL without me fact checking it.
Like $56 million.
$73 million in cap space.
Yeah. They will have Connor Bedard to pay, though. Connor Bedard, they do have to pay him.
They'll have to pay Connor Bedard. Frankie Nazar's had a pretty good start this career. They have 0 goalies signed for that season as well. So, obviously, they're going to have to fill out the roster. With $73 million, they better have to fill out their roster, but they're going to have some opportunities to do that. For more individual team coverage on free agency, you can go check out all the Locked On NHL shows. Thank you to the everydayers who are here making us your first listen each and every day. Some more deals trickling in. Andrew Mangiapane signs with the Edmonton Oilers. That deal came across overnight. It comes in as a 2-year deal at $3.6 million. And today, there's a couple rumors out there, so I'm sure the boys here will have it for you tomorrow on the Locked On NHL podcast. For today, we pass it over to them. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been your Wednesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.